Hello world, welcome to Champions Online Build Showcase. This build is a themed dodge tank based on the Pink Ranger. Why am I making a Power Ranger build? I had a request to make a Pink Ranger outfit which I was going to throw on some random archetype, but then I ended up picking up a freeform slot in sale, so I figured why not do an entire build? Little did I know there are about 50 million Pink Rangers and they all have about 1,000 different weapons. Who knew? Basically, I kinda went with powers on the Pirate Rangers because pirates are cool. So that means guns, swords, and kicking and punching. I went with Constitution as primary super stat because it does so much for this build. It's mostly a dexterity heavy build because dexterity mods are so much cheaper, and they fuel deflection. Deflection provides more dodge than the dexterity tree equivalent. I mean, you can just go crazy with dexterity. I have 5 dexterity mods and 1 constitution mod, and they're just the rank 5 ones, so obviously if you rank them up more, if you have like 7, it's even better dodge added to what you have, so it's really nice. Adrenaline Rush, while you have a crap ton of dexterity, so you have, decent crit chance. And then Adrenaline Rush just lets you heal while you're kicking things in the face. It's pretty much free healing that you don't have to do anything for it. The bad side is that because you're taking Constitution instead of Dexterity as your primary super stat, your critical severity does suffer. We're probably going to be at least 85, and the 85 to 90 range is what your severity is going to end up being at once you gear up. Dexterity and endurance secondaries, because, well, obviously dexterity is mostly for deflection, it's for crits, it's for healing, it really does everything for this build. Normally I would go with intelligence, but it just does not work very well with this build. I just felt like I had energy issues all the time, especially since I have Sonic Boom Generator. It means my molecular self-assembly does suffer because I have no intelligence, but I honestly don't need to use it anyway. It's just that there's really nothing better that I need to use, and I already had a hard time trying to figure out what I wanted to use for my last power, so if you wanted to replace it with something that actually works, if you wanted to alter the build a little bit, that would be fine too. But Fuel My Fire, all 3 points into that, it's just great. I do have over 10,000 health, and 10,000 should be the minimum for this kind of build. But of course more is better, but I don't know if you're gonna really be able to get too much more than 10,000 without having to sacrifice dexterity. It's kind of a balancing act depending on your needs. Since energy isn't an issue because of endurance and Fuel My Fire, you can pretty much focus on cooldown reduction in your gear. I mean, there's no reason for cost discount too much because you just don't need it. Sometimes you're just gonna get hit in the face anyway, so I went with Warden and Vindicator since I do only have the 90% dodge with rank 1 Thunder Kicks. Even with rank 2, I would not have 100%. I'd be very close. There's always that chance that if my buff drops, my dodge buffs drop, or something, I could get hit in the face because my base dodge is 68%, so there's always that chance. Plus, Vindicator has the 15 severity, and then Warden has 10, so you get the 25 severity that you really need that. Well, I guess you don't really need that. More crits equals more damage, and more severity equals higher damage when you crit. In the Warden tree, when you have Slaughter, it pretty much benefits both 2 powers, Thundering Kicks and Ego Weaponry, because they're both combos. And frankly, being able to do more crits, especially with Ego Weaponry, since I have Siphoning Strikes, essentially I'll just be healing myself more often, which is great. And of course, Offense Expert and Vindicator lets me use Ego Surge more. More crits for more healing and more damage is more aggro. Actually, so is more healing. There are 3 key powers for this build, and that would be Thundering Kicks, Lightning Reflexes, and Parry plus Elusive Monk. Everything else could probably be replaced by whatever you want, so if you want a dodge build, those are the 3 things that you really need to have for the actual dodging to work to get as close to 100% as possible. You can get up to 100%, but with my budget build, no, I'm not getting that. I am getting up to 90, although I would highly recommend keeping Circle of Primal Dominion because you have absolutely no rock resistance. Plus, it also aids in threat generation. It has a small heal, which is, I think it's like 60 every whenever it takes a second or something. So not exactly all that great, but it's pretty much a free heal, and you don't really need that much healing anyway. And of course, threat generation. I mean, you can't go wrong with more threat generation. And it also has a small defense buff. Not anything big. I think it's like maybe somewhere around 15%. So, and then the other thing I would recommend keeping is masterful dodge. When you first start a fight, not all of your dodge buffs are up, so you can just hit masterful dodge and you'll automatically have 200 extra % dodge, so you will be dodging every single thing. And then it's also a small avoidance buff too. But it gives you time to build up your dodge buffs. So you can like kick things in the face, you get your 12% or 15 whatever percent extra dodge, and then your elusive monk kicks in. Thundering Kicks is one of the weakest combos and it's never going to have amazing damage, but it does have the fastest rotation of pretty much anything in the game, which means you have more chances to critically hit, and you have more chances to apply crippling challenge. So it of course gives you a dodge buff, which is 12, 15, and 18% depending on your rank. Now you have a choice between rank 2 and Floating Lotus Blossom after you take crippling challenge. Your damage is going to suck either way. I chose to go with Floating Lotus Blossom, and I often got 2 or 3 stacks between enemy attacks, even when I was always holding aggro. What this advantage does is it gives you a stacking buff that increases your dodge by 5% per stack and is removed once you actually dodge. So if you have 2 stacks up, most of the time that pretty much puts you at 100% dodge all the time. It does actually stack all the way up to 20 if you were wondering, which enemies attack surprisingly slowly. I mean, obviously if they have like some crazy dot on you, you're never going to get any more than 1 stack, which is still 5%. Because I wanted to keep my pirate theme, I wanted to have a sword. I went with Eagle Weaponry, but I used it to heal. If you have the Siphoning Strikes, when you critically hit, you heal yourself. It also works really well for Ego Surge plus Nimble Mind because it doubles your crit chance, so you're getting the crits from Siphoning Strikes and the crits from Adrenaline Rush, and they're all healing you. For guns, I had a problem with figuring out how to have an area effect attack and a ranged attack, so I just kind of put it all in one with Sonic Boom Generator. There really aren't what I would consider a lot of good area effect damage dealing powers for melee characters. I mean, there's plenty that do cones. I don't know, I don't really like cone attacks all the time. For a tank, I would say some of the best things are like Sword Cyclone, and the Vortex Chains are great because they just suck everything to you. I mean, those are pretty much some of the best ones, I would say. They have like a decent range, so. But I didn't want to use those because they're kind of theme breaking. I don't think any of the Power Rangers use chains. And I wanted to use a gun, so Sonic Boom Generator. It's actually pretty good. It's not that bad. It looks cool. I like it. The damage is kind of meh, and it definitely uses more energy than it needs to, but with Endurance as my 3rd super stat and Feel My Fire, it really doesn't matter as long as I'm getting hit in the face with some attacks, which normally I am, because I did put Challenging Strikes on it, because why not? It's just a free point. And it solves the problem because it's an AoE and it's a ranged attack. It's actually a 100-foot ranged attack, so it's basically a 100-foot area attack. It's not like the most amazing range, it's only like 10 feet. The other thing I was considering is Storm of Arrows. It does have a cooldown, although once you hit 40 and gear up, it should be pretty low, especially if you're focusing on cooldown reduction. It'll probably be like 1 or 1.5 seconds in the 1 to 2 second range. Of course, Circle of Primal Dominion, I would consider this to be pretty much necessary for this kind of build, just so you could have knock resistance. But what makes me sad is I took this into Gravitar, I got hit with one of Gravitar's death bubbles, and I still went flying even though I had 480% knock resistance, plus I was blocking. And plus I have the 10% knockback resistance from strength, which, okay, that's pretty lame, so that seems like quite a bit, but nope, it's still not enough to prevent going flying if you stand in one of Gravitar's death bubbles and sit there and block and you still go flying. It's like, what? I don't understand. I don't know, I used Mini Drive because I had no idea what else I wanted to use, so I'm like, well, why not have the bosses do less damage? It does less damage to everybody. If you wanted to pick something else for more damage, that'd be fine too. It doesn't really break theme, it's just kind of an on-hit next effect, so I thought it worked well for the theme of build. My budget gear was the heroic set, and the biggest thing I wanted was the gloves with crit severity. You could put in a gambler's or you could put in like a growth mod. I went with the growth mod because it gives me, 21 constitution, which around 300 more health. I would rather have the health, and the gambler's, it was maybe 1 or 2% critical hit chance, and I already have over 30% critical hit chance, so yeah, more health was the bigger draw. And the utility is whatever. I would say go with the cooldown reduction because you shouldn't need to worry about cost with endurance, so pretty simple. And rank 5 mods everything. I have just over 10,000 health when I'm in tank mode, almost 10,400. So 5 dexterity 5 mods and then 1 constitution mod, rank 5. Secondaries, normal purples. You don't have to go with the vigilante gear unless you want to upgrade. I just went with purples. And going with whatever I needed. I believe I had offense on the gloves instead of crit chance, but whichever. If you can find endurance with crit chance, it'll probably be a lot cheaper than constitution with hit chance. So I would say make sure you have flat health on the secondary 338-ish health one. That's always good to have because more health, more healing, not being dead, super important. Let's talk about Frosty Tanking. Yes, as I mentioned, it is totally possible to tank Frosty, and honestly, tanking Frosty with this dodge build was a lot better than when I tried tanking Frosty with Behemoth. Of course, we did have a good healer, so that helped too, but honestly, I really wasn't taking a ton of damage. It wasn't nearly as bad as when I was using the Behemoth, just because some of Frosty's attacks are just so ridiculously powerful. Ego weaponry, I wouldn't want to spend too much time using it, because if you are in a pre-made, there are going to be probably at least 1 or 2 people that are those really high DPS people, and you want to be using Thundering Kicks as often as possible and not spending time healing. If I had Conviction instead of the Ego weaponry, that probably would be better for me, but I don't because I like Ego weaponry, and frankly, with the healer, which should have anyway, you can just give you some healing every once in a while and keep you topped off, and it shouldn't matter anyway. So basically my totally pro strategy was run up to Frosty's face using Masterful Dodge and then start kicking out. So I would have 270% dodge before I ever got any of my dodge buffs up. And after a few rotations, then I would drop my circle because it gives me time to, build some aggro up and have my dodge buffs up. And then basically it's just looking at my health and making sure if I take a huge hit of damage, I can pop Resurgence. And if I get held in the ice block, then that's when I would go with Masterful Dodge and hope that my team was on the ball and freed me from the ice. But pretty much I did not block anything at all. The only thing worth blocking is the frozen daggers, which has no tail, so you can't block it anyway. When they did the falling ice, I didn't block during that either. I just kept kicking Frosty in the face. It doesn't do any damage. If you were ever wondering, during the phase when they have the falling ice and whatever, both of them are immune for almost all of it. I think until one of them dies, and then they're not. Then you can actually hurt them during the falling ice thing. But other than that, they're immune, so if you're a damage dealer, there's no reason for you to even bother attacking them. You might as well just stand there and block. But for this dodge tank, I just sat there and kicked him in the face, so I wouldn't lose aggro. And I didn't need to block anything, because it doesn't really hurt me any. The falling ice does not do a whole lot of damage, so no point. Just move closer to him, redrop my circle, and then keep kicking him in the face. As for tanking Blaze, well, you pretty much run up the exact same way. You run up to her face with Masterful Dodge, and then you just keep kicking her, and then you drop your circle, and you don't have to pay attention at all any other time. Unless the person that's the Frosty Tank dies, and then you miraculously start getting aggro for both of them, which hopefully doesn't happen. In fact, nothing she does is worth blocking. You do not even have to pay attention at all during this fight. You could get fancy, and when she does, I think it's her rimfire or whatever, the splash damage, charge up attack, you can run over to Frosty, and splash damage will do a ton of damage to him. However, it'll also do a ton of damage to any melee DPS that's over there, which could kill them, or it could kill the Frosty Tank if he just took a ice dagger to the face or two and he's really low, and you could kill a whole bunch of people. So the rest of your team may not know what you're doing, especially if there's some new people in there. Nobody really does that very often, so I know I've gotten killed by that because I didn't know what the other person was doing, and I was like, oh, I get it. I prefer the not paying attention to anything option, because if you're gonna win, you're gonna win. If your Frosty Tank dies, then you might just lose anyway. I don't know if you could tank them both with this. I think you would not be able to, because, well, you really use Thundering Kicks in both of them at the same time. I don't think the damage would be too much of an issue. But if your Frosty Tank dies, it probably means you don't have a really good healer, or maybe the healer died, or there just isn't one, and that's not really looking good for your fight. I only managed to take this build into Gravatar once during the rotation, but Circle is amazing here. The Circle of Primal Dom, oh my god, not being knocked all over the place is incredibly awesome. I didn't have aggro during pretty much any of the fight because the dude with the PA Power Armor Exploit build was there, and he took aggro for the most part, and then basically it was tanks night out because there were probably like 3 other tanks in this. So I didn't really have aggro for the most part. I did a little bit towards the end, but the tanks with the better gear were out-tanking me, and of course the dude with the Power Armor Exploit build was out-tanking everybody for the most part. But this was a pretty easy fight. I mean, just being a melee character in Gravatar is usually a pain in the butt, because if you're a damage dealer, you probably have to block like every single freaking attack. Not the case with this. The only things that are what you should block are the bubbles that hold you, just because it's annoying to be held, and the death bubble. And that's exactly what I did. I just stood there in my circle and blocked the death bubble, and then I went flying. And I actually took more fall damage than I did from the bubble itself. I only lost half my health. That's it. With the fall damage and the damage from the bubble combined was half my health. So that's not bad. It's not, I mean, considering this is a budget build, it's not like the most amazing gear or anything, so that's pretty good. I mean, that's, one resurgence and that's completely restored, so I didn't even bother using Masterful Dodge for the death bubble, and it was totally fine. I would recommend popping Masterful Dodge anyway, just because it does give you a little bit more avoidance and it's a guaranteed dodge. It was a really smooth fight, despite it took a little longer because there were so many tanks in the fight. But everything else, I didn't block anything else at all. There was no reason for me to. I didn't really have to heal very much. I did, since I wasn't holding aggro anyway, I did use my ego weaponry to heal up a little bit here and there, but it was pretty decent. I mean, I can imagine if I had like an elixir with this build, I probably would never ever heal at all, except for the death bubble would probably be the only thing I healed myself with, because I have the healing from elixir, from the crits, and from the circle. Overall, I would have to say making a dodge build turned out pretty well. The theming aspect helps a lot. I like to make builds in a theme. If I don't have a theme, I have a hard time making a build. And using Ego Weaponry as my heal, and then having Sonic Boom Generator as my ranged attack and my area effect, I liked that. That turned out well. I wanted to be able to have a gun power, and I wanted to have my sword power, but I didn't want to have to be, crazy and inefficient with a bunch of random junk in my build. So I think this is a good compromise. I can have my sword power, and my sword power heals me, and I can have my gun power, and my gun power acts as my ranged attack and my area effect. And I even had a power that I had no idea what to do with, so I just kind of threw Mini Drive in there, because, well, why not? So I went from having, too much to put in one build to, I have a power that I don't know what to do with.
The Harbinger was never really alive. Just a mass of rock and seaweed, animated by dark